There's a country wedged between Switzerland and Austria that defies everything we think we know about nations. It's smaller than Washington DC, you could drive across it in 20 minutes. It has no airport, no army, and somehow it's one of the wealthiest countries on earth. This is Liechtenstein, a place that shouldn't exist but does. And the story of how it survived is stranger than you'd imagine. You're not hearing a perfect AI narrator here, but a real human, accent included. Every video is built on real research and real effort. If you want to support human content creation, consider subscribing. Thank you. Picture this, over 38,000 people living in just 62 square miles of Alpine territory. That's roughly the size of a single neighborhood in most major cities. Yet this microstate boasts one of the world's top 3 GDPs per capita. It's doubly landlocked, meaning every country it borders is also landlocked. The only other nation with this distinction is Uzbekistan, halfway around the world. But here's what makes Liechtenstein truly bizarre. This isn't some ancient realm that's been independent for millennia. For the first century of its existence, the ruling prince of Liechtenstein never even visited. Let that sink in. They created a country and just didn't show up. So how did this happen? How does a country this small, this absurd, manage to carve itself a permanent spot on the map? Let's rewind to the Holy Roman Empire, that sprawling patchwork of kingdoms, duchies and principalities that defined Central Europe for centuries. The Liechtenstein family were nobles, wealthy and influential, serving as advisors to emperors. But they had one problem: they owned no land that was directly subordinate to the emperor himself. In the complicated hierarchy of the Holy Roman Empire, this was a deal-breaker for securing a seat among the imperial diet, the empire's governing assembly. Enter Prince Johann Adam Andreas of Liechtenstein, a man with ambition and deep pockets. In 1699, he purchased the lordship of Schellenberg. Just over a decade later, in 1712, he acquired the county of Vaduz. These two tiny territories, wedged in the Rhine Valley, would become the foundation for something unprecedented. On January 23, 1719, Holy Roman Emperor Charles VI issued a decree. Schellenberg and Vaduz would be merged into a single principality under the Liechtenstein family name. It was official. A new realm was born, not through war or revolution, but through a real estate transaction. The newly minted Principality of Liechtenstein was now part of the Holy Roman Empire, and Prince Anton Florian of Liechtenstein was its ruler. But there was something deeply strange about this arrangement. The prince lived in Vienna. The country existed hundreds of kilometers away in the mountains. For over 100 years, no prince of Liechtenstein would set foot in the country that had their name. It was essentially an investment property. But then came Napoleon, and Napoleon changed everything. When Napoleon crushed the Austro-Russian coalition at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, the Holy Roman Empire's days were numbered. The ancient institution dissolved, and Liechtenstein, which had nearly been absorbed into Bavaria, suddenly found itself independent. Not by choice, not through struggle, just through the chaos of European power shifts. Napoleon folded Liechtenstein into his Confederation of the Rhine, and when Napoleon fell, the principality joined the German Confederation, aligning itself closely with the Austrian Empire. For decades, Liechtenstein survived by hitching its fortunes to larger powers. It was a strategy born from necessity, a microstate navigating a continent defined by war and imperial ambition. Then came 1866. The German Confederation collapsed after the Austro-Prussian War, and Liechtenstein made a decision that would define its future. It would stand alone. It dissolved its tiny army of 80 soldiers and declared total neutrality. No alliances, no military engagements, just pure absolute neutrality. And this was a gamble. A country with no army, surrounded by empires, betting that the world would simply leave it alone. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. When World War I erupted, Liechtenstein remained neutral. The Allies embargoed it because of its close ties to Austria-Hungary, but the country survived. After the war, it pivoted towards Switzerland, establishing a customs and monetary union that exists to this day. Then came the Second World War. Nazi Germany annexed Austria in 1938, bringing the Third Reich right to Liechtenstein's doorstep. Whispers of a pro-Nazi movement circulated within the principality. Some feared annexation was inevitable. But Prince Franz Josef II, who had finally taken up residence in Liechtenstein just before the war, navigated a delicate diplomatic tightrope. Meetings with Hitler himself, careful neutrality, and once again the tiny nation survived. Switzerland and Liechtenstein, side by side, remained oases of peace while the continent burned around them. But the war wasn't kind to the royal family. The Liechtensteins held vast estates across Europe, including massive landholdings in Czechoslovakia, Poland and Moravia. These territories were seized by communist governments after the war. The family lost lands 10 times larger than the entire country of Liechtenstein. In fact, Liechtenstein didn't recognize the Czech Republic or Slovakia until 2009, decades after the Cold War ended, because the dispute over confiscated land remained unresolved. Even today, the family still refuses to acknowledge the seizure as legitimate. After the war, Liechtenstein was broke. The royal family began selling off pieces of their legendary art collection just to keep the country afloat. In 1967, they sold Leonardo da Vinci's Ginevra de' Benci to the National Gallery of Art in Washington for $5 million, a record price for a painting at the time. But Liechtenstein had one asset that would transform its fortunes: its sovereignty. The country became a tax haven. Corporations flocked to register there, attracted by federal laws and financial secrecy. Today, there are more registered corporations in Liechtenstein than there are citizens. The country has quietly become one of the wealthiest per capita on Earth. And the Liechtenstein family? They are still there, still ruling. In fact, they are the richest royal family in Europe. Their wealth comes from two primary sources: a vast art collection valued at least $2 billion, and the LGT Group, a private banking and asset management empire. In 2003, Prince Hans Adam II pushed for a constitutional referendum that would grant him even more power, including the right to veto parliament. At one point, he even joked that if the referendum failed, he might sell the country to Bill Gates. But the more serious threat was that he would simply leave Liechtenstein altogether. The vote passed with 64% approval. In 2012, another referendum confirmed those expanded powers with an even greater 76% majority. Liechtenstein is a constitutional monarchy, yes, but the prince wields more authority than almost any other European monarch, and the people seem fine with that. Every August 15th, Liechtenstein celebrates its national day with a tradition unlike anywhere else in the world. The entire country is invited to a party at Vaduz Castle, hosted by the prince himself. Citizens can drink, eat, and personally meet the head of state. Imagine that, an entire country small enough that everyone can actually show up. And then there are the accidental invasions. Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein on multiple occasions. In 1968, Swiss artillery shells hit a ski resort, damaging some chairlifts. In 1976, 75 Swiss soldiers took a wrong turn and marched half a kilometer into Liechtenstein. It happened again in 1992 and again in 2007. After the 2007 incident, a Liechtenstein official calmly stated, "It's not like they invaded with attack helicopters, no problem, these things happen." And that might be the most Liechtenstein response imaginable. A tiny neutral country with no army, so unbothered by its neighbors' mistakes that it simply shrugs them off. So how does Liechtenstein exist? How did this microstate survive centuries of war, the collapse of empires, Nazi expansion and the Cold War? The answer is surprisingly simple: luck, neutrality and good diplomacy. Liechtenstein never posed a threat to anyone. It had no army to invade with, no resources worth plundering, no strategic value in the grand chessboard of European warfare. It was harmless, and because it was harmless, larger nations simply ignored it. When empires collapsed, Liechtenstein was left standing because no one cared enough to conquer it. But luck alone doesn't explain everything. The Liechtenstein family proved remarkably skilled at navigating the shifting tides of European power. They aligned with the right allies at the right times, pivoted when necessary, and maintained positive relations with neighboring countries. When the age of conquest finally ended in Western Europe, Liechtenstein had already secured its legitimacy. By the 21st century, joining international organizations like the United Nations and the European Economic Area cemented its status as a fully recognized sovereign state. Today, Liechtenstein is a prosperous, peaceful nation nestled in the Alps. It has one of the highest standards of living in the world. Its largest company, Hilti, manufactures high-end tools. Its banking sector manages billions. Liechtenstein exists because of a series of fortunate accidents, strategic neutrality, and the sheer absurdity of European history. It's a microstate that became a country through a real estate deal, survived by simply staying out of everyone's way, and thrived by embracing financial innovation. It's a reminder that nations aren't always forged in fire or revolution. Sometimes they are born from purchases and paperwork. Sometimes survival is about being small enough to ignore. And sometimes the most unlikely countries outlast empires that seemed invincible. Liechtenstein shouldn't exist, but it does. And that in itself is extraordinary.